Why was everyone staring at her? Maya Rodriguez didn't notice at first. She was too focused on the weapon laid out in front of her, an M40A5, black and gleaming under the Nevada sun as if it still remembered every life it had taken. The rifle wasn't supposed to be here, not in her hands, not under her name. She wasn't listed in the sniper platoon. She wasn't even rated for advanced marksmanship. Her official record said supply technician, 3rd Battalion, Fort Blackstone. Her job was to count bullets, not fire them. And yet here she was crouched low, cheek resting gently against the stock, eyes behind the scope. Where the hell did you get that rifle? The voice cut through the air like a blade. Staff Sergeant Pierce. 30 years in uniform, a man forged from rules and routines. He had seen every kind of mistake a soldier could make. But this was new. He stood rigid, weathered face lined with authority, watching a woman he'd barely noticed for months cradle a sniper rifle like she'd been born with it. Pierce's tone snapped through the desert air again. Rodriguez, this isn't the damn supply depot. You don't belong here. Maya didn't look up, didn't answer. She adjusted the bipod instead, quiet, deliberate, her fingers tracing the metal like she was remembering an old friend. Around her, laughter stirred, the kind that starts in whispers and grows sharp with mockery. "Look what we got here, boys," called Corporal Jake Thompson, his southern drawl dripping with amusement. "Supply girl wants to play sniper. Probably doesn't even know which end the bullets come out of," Specialist Chun added, grinning. Private First Class Johnson, barely 19, eager to impress, joined in with nervous laughter. "Maybe she thinks it's like those video games in the rec room." The range echoed with the easy cruelty of soldiers who thought they were untouchable. Maya stayed silent. Her stillness unnerved them more than if she'd shouted back. She simply reached for the scope, adjusting the elevation knob, one click at a time. Her breathing was steady, mechanical, every movement precise, efficient, not like someone pretending but like someone remembering. Pierce took a step forward. "Put it down, Rodriguez, now." But he didn't sound as certain as before. There was something in her posture that didn't belong to a supply clerk. Her body aligned perfectly behind the weapon, elbows set, shoulders relaxed, weight distributed like muscle memory had guided her into place. Every motion had purpose. No hesitation, no guesswork. The heat shimmered over the range, waves of air twisting into mirages across the sand. Dust devils danced in the distance, and the targets, white boards at 200, 400, 600, and 750 yards, looked like ghosts floating in the haze. Pierce folded his arms, covering his uncertainty with authority. "You got 30 seconds to prove you're not wasting my time. Then you put that thing back and go count ammo like you're supposed to." The soldiers chuckled again, but the laughter was thinner now. Something about her composure had made their jokes sound forced. Maya slid prone behind the rifle. The metal kissed the dirt. She inhaled once deeply, eyes locking through the scope. "Target 750, she murmured. And then silence. Even the desert wind seemed to pause, waiting. The first shot cracked like thunder, a perfect, confident, unflinching sound. The bullet tore through 750 yards of heat and dust, and found the bullseye dead center. A second passed, then another. The digital monitor flickered, confirming what no one believed. Dead center. The laughter died instantly. Someone whispered, "No way." Pierce's jaw locked. "Fluke," he muttered, but his voice didn't carry conviction. Maya cycled the bolt, the metallic click echoing like punctuation in an unspoken sentence. She didn't celebrate, didn't smirk. Her expression didn't change at all. She exhaled, fired again. Another perfect strike. And then a third. 3 shots, all in the same hole, a grouping so tight it defied logic. Corporal Thompson's grin collapsed into disbelief. "That's not possible," he whispered. Chun shook his head, blinking at the monitor. "Computer must be glitching." But the machine didn't lie. Even the wind seemed afraid to move now. Pierce's confidence cracked. 30 years of training couldn't explain what he'd just seen. No trainee, no hobby shooter, no supply clerk could shoot like that. Not in this heat. Not at that distance. Then footsteps, heavy, measured, and full of authority. Colonel Daniel Williams. The air itself seemed to stand at attention as he approached. Every soldier stiffened. This man carried the kind of presence that didn't need introduction, a reputation built on combat, leadership, and survival. He was a legend across Fort Blackstone. But when his eyes found Maya Rodriguez, and more importantly, the rifle in her hands, he froze mid-stride. For the first time that day, the colonel's composure faltered. "Where did you get that rifle?" he asked quietly, not with anger but recognition. Maya looked up from the scope, her gaze steady, calm, unthreatened. "It was in the rack, sir." Williams' jaw tightened. The world around him faded, replaced by a sound from years ago, the echo of a sniper's report in the Hindu Kush Mountains. He had heard that rhythm before, the precision, the timing. He remembered the way his unit had been pinned down under heavy fire, trapped between rock and death, until salvation came from nowhere. Bullets that found enemies no one could even see. 9 shots, 9 kills, each one impossible, each one saving another life. And then silence. The sniper had vanished, leaving no name, no record, only a whisper, desert wind. A ghost who appeared, saved lives, and disappeared before anyone could thank her. William's throat went dry. He looked again at the woman in front of him, quiet, disciplined, faceless among her peers. It couldn't be. And yet he knew. "Sir," Pierce's voice broke the silence, uneasy. "Should I?" Williams raised a hand. "As you were, Sergeant." Then softly, almost to himself, "Desert wind." Maya's eyes flickered, the first sign of emotion since the shooting began. A brief pause, a shadow across her calm. "Some missions never happened, Colonel," she said quietly. "Some people were never there." And with that, she cleared the weapon, returned it to the rack, and walked away. Nobody stopped her. For a long time, no one even breathed. Then the whispers began. "Who is she? What the hell just happened?" She made the colonel freeze. The laughter that had once mocked her was gone now, replaced by awe, fear, respect. Pierce watched her disappear into the blinding light at the far end of the range, the rifle's memory still burning behind his eyes. For the first time in decades, the hardened NCO found himself speechless. The colonel stood still, staring at the spot where Maya had been. His mind was already spiraling through layers of classified reports and erased names. He had seen that level of precision once before, and he had sworn never to speak of it. If Maya Rodriguez was who he thought she was, then Fort Blackstone had just witnessed something that wasn't supposed to exist. Back inside the armory, the soldiers remained in stunned silence. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air, sharp and metallic. Somewhere, a casing rolled lazily across the concrete, its faint clink echoing like an afterthought. Even Thompson, the loudest of them, said nothing. It wasn't just the shooting that silenced them. It was the calm, the way she had acted like it didn't matter, like perfection was just routine. Johnson exhaled shakily. "She's not just a clerk, is she?" Pierce didn't answer. He couldn't. Because deep down, he knew something they all felt but couldn't say, that they'd seen something sacred, something dangerous, and maybe something broken. That night, long after the range had emptied, Colonel Williams sat alone in his office. The lights were dim, the air thick with memory. A classified folder lay open on his desk, edges yellowed, ink faded, the kind of file that didn't officially exist. He flipped through the pages, eyes scanning old mission reports, blurred photographs, and redacted names. Operation Sundial. Location undisclosed. Result: 42 American lives saved. Sniper redacted. Alias Desert Wind. His breath caught when he saw the old image attached to the file, a silhouette kneeling behind a scope, her face hidden by a scarf, eyes visible only in reflection. He turned the photo sideways under the desk lamp. The eyes. Same calm, same unflinching focus. Maya Rodriguez. Williams closed the file slowly, pressing a hand over the cover as if to seal the ghosts back inside. Outside, the wind howled over the base, sweeping across the range, kicking up small whirlwinds of dust that whispered through the silence. Somewhere out there in the shadows beyond the barracks, the woman they once ignored was still awake, sitting quietly, hands clasped, eyes distant. Not because she wanted to be noticed, but because she never wanted to be remembered. Sometimes, the most dangerous soldiers aren't the ones who speak the loudest. They're the ones who don't need to. And when the world forgets them, they stay forgotten until the rifle finds its way back to their hands. She couldn't sleep. The desert wind scraped against the barracks windows, carrying sand and memory. Every sound at Fort Blackstone had a rhythm: boots on gravel, engines humming somewhere beyond the walls, distant laughter from soldiers who still believed they understood war. But tonight, Maya Rodriguez heard only echoes. She sat on the edge of her bunk, hands clasped between her knees, the faint scent of gun oil still on her fingertips. That smell used to mean focus. Now it meant exposure. The M40A5 had been a mistake, or maybe fate. She wasn't sure anymore. She told herself it didn't matter, that she had been careful for years, hiding behind spreadsheets and inventory forms. But one moment of instinct had undone it all. She remembered the colonel's face, the way his eyes widened, the recognition that had no place on an open range. He knew. And that meant others would soon know too. Maya stared at her reflection in the small locker mirror. The woman who looked back wasn't the ghost she used to be. Her hair was shorter now, regulation neat. Her expression calmer. But beneath the uniform and the fatigue, she saw the same fracture, the one left behind in the Hindu Kush Mountains 3 years ago. The same fracture that had made her disappear. It started with a sound. Snow crunching under boots, a radio whisper, the smell of diesel and burned air. They called it Operation Sundial, but no one who survived ever spoke that name again. Her team had been pinned for 12 hours in a frozen valley, enemy fire echoing from ridgelines they couldn't even see. The cold gnawed at their bones, and the sky never changed, gray, endless, merciless. She remembered Lieutenant Mason's voice through the comms. "We're surrounded. No extraction, no air cover. We hold until dark." And then his voice stopped. Just static. Maya had been 3 clicks east, alone with her spotter, a man named Alvarez, quiet as she was. They had orders to cover the perimeter, but when Mason's transmission cut out, Alvarez looked at her and said softly, "It's not perimeter anymore. It's rescue." They moved without permission, crawling through frozen dust, every movement deliberate, breath clouding in the icy air. She had counted 17 enemy silhouettes through the scope. They were closing in. She didn't think, she calculated. Wind 3 miles east, distance 1,120 meters, drop 2.5 mil. Exhale fire. The first man fell before the others even turned. Then the second, then the third. Each shot a decision she couldn't take back. Each life a line drawn between survival and guilt. She had become the storm, invisible, precise, inevitable. And when it was done, the valley was silent again. 42 American soldiers walked out of that trap alive, but 2 didn't. One of them was Alvarez. A mortar hit near their position after the 9th shot. She still remembered the light, that blinding white flash that erased sound, erased thought, erased everything but the moment she crawled toward him through the snow, his blood steaming against the ice. He had smiled. "You're gonna have to finish the count without me." And then he was gone. After the mission, they told her the report was sealed. that the sniper known as Desert Wind would vanish for her own safety, that the story would never be told. She agreed, because some stories don't belong to heroes. They belong to ghosts. Back in the barracks, Maya pressed her palms over her face, trying to stop the tremor in her hands. She could still feel the weight of that rifle, the way it fit perfectly against her shoulder, as if it had been waiting all these years. Someone knocked softly on her door. Rodriguez. She froze. The voice was male, older, careful. Colonel Williams. She opened the door halfway. The corridor light sliced across his face, turning the wrinkles around his eyes into deep canyons. He wasn't wearing his cap. That alone told her this wasn't about protocol. "May I?" he asked. She stepped aside. Williams entered slowly, gaze scanning the small, tidy room, the folded uniform, the neatly stacked reports, the absence of anything personal. "You keep it clean," he said quietly. "Easier that way, sir." He nodded once, hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the hum of the fluorescent light above them. Finally, he said, "You saved my platoon that day in the Kush. I remember the comms feed. You didn't answer when we tried to reach you." "I wasn't supposed to," she said. "I figured that out later." He paused. "They said you didn't exist." "Maybe I don't," Maya whispered. Williams studied her, the kind of look that comes from decades of reading soldiers, the broken ones, the dangerous ones, and the rare few who were both. "You're not in trouble," he said finally, "at least not with me." "Then why are you here, sir?" He hesitated. "Because I don't believe people like you should stay buried." Her laugh was short, hollow. "Buried is safer for everyone." "I saw you shoot today," he said. "I've seen hundreds of marksmen in my career. None of them did what you did, not in that heat, not with that calm." She looked away. "It wasn't calm, sir, it was memory." He tilted his head. "Memory of what?" She met his eyes. "Of what it costs." For the first time, the colonel's shoulders sagged. The authority in his stance softened into something almost human. "You lost someone," he said quietly. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Williams looked down as if searching for words in the scuffed floor. "I still remember his name, you know, Alvarez. The report said your spotter didn't make it." Her breath caught. "You read those files?" He nodded. "I wasn't supposed to, but after today I pulled clearance I hadn't used in years." "Then you know why I'm here." "I know what they said. They said you couldn't handle it, that the mission compromised your stability. They called it a breakdown." Maya's jaw tightened. "It wasn't a breakdown, it was grief." "And they exiled you to supply work." She shrugged. "Better than therapy or prison." Williams sighed. "They buried a weapon because it made them uncomfortable. They turned you invisible because they didn't understand what you carried." "Sir," she said softly, "maybe that's exactly what I needed." He looked at her for a long time, not as a superior, but as a man who had once been saved by a ghost. "You know, Rodriguez, sometimes I think the military doesn't break soldiers. It just teaches them how to hide the broken parts." Her eyes flickered. "You should get some rest, Colonel." He almost smiled. "You too." When he left, she closed the door gently, leaning her forehead against the cold metal. For a while she stayed like that, eyes closed, breathing slow, as if afraid that if she opened them, the past would still be standing there. Later that night she walked out to the range. The moon hung low, pale and wide, washing the desert in silver light. The targets were gone, the lanes empty, but she could still see them, ghosts in the distance. She knelt in the dirt where she'd fired earlier, fingertips brushing the faint indent her rifle had left. It was quiet, too quiet. She whispered 9 shots. The number echoed in her chest like a heartbeat. She remembered the way Alvarez used to count each hit softly, almost like a prayer. "One for them, one for us," he'd say. "Balance." But there had never been balance, only survival. She tilted her head back, staring at the stars, cold, unblinking, indifferent. "Why did you give me the rifle that day?" she murmured to the sky. "Why did you trust me?" The wind didn't answer. It just carried her voice away, scattering it across the sand. At dawn, the base stirred awake. Trucks rolled by, engines rumbling. Soldiers jogged past the range, laughing, shouting cadence. Life moved on because it always did. But as Maya walked back toward the depot, something inside her shifted. For years, she had been content to vanish, to let the world believe she was just another name on a roster. But now the secret was bleeding through the cracks. The colonel knew. Others would suspect. And deep down, a part of her that she thought had died, the part that once believed in purpose, had started to wake. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was dangerous. But for the first time in years, Maya Rodriguez felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel since the mountains. The faint, stubborn pulse of resolve. Because ghosts don't always haunt the living. Sometimes they return to finish what they left undone. Morning came wrapped in the smell of diesel and dust. Maya moved through the depot like nothing had changed, clipboard in hand, head down, the same quiet rhythm she had perfected for 3 years, but every doorway felt heavier now, every glance sharper. Whispers followed her through the corridors like wind under a door. She stacked crates, signed manifests, checked serial numbers. Routine, always routine. The trick to disappearing was simple: stay predictable. Yet she could feel the shift. Something was moving underneath the surface of Fort Blackstone, quiet and unseen. Meetings that didn't appear on the schedule. Radios switching channels when she walked past. A tension in the air that even the rookies could feel. And somewhere above all of it, Colonel Williams. He had been different since the range. Still professional, still composed, but the mask had cracked. She had seen the curiosity in his eyes, the kind that never leads to rest. That evening, as the sky bled into orange and violet, the call came. "Specialist Rodriguez," a voice said through the intercom. "Report to operations." Her pen froze mid-signature. She knew that tone, flat, bureaucratic, harmless to most, but loaded for her. She wiped her hands, straightened her uniform, and walked toward the heart of the base. The operations building was all concrete and silence. 2 flags hung motionless in the still air. Inside, the corridors smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. Williams was waiting in a glass-walled briefing room with 2 others, a civilian in a gray suit and a lieutenant she didn't recognize. "Maya," the colonel greeted, using her first name like he'd already decided formality wasn't needed. "Come in." She entered, posture crisp, face unreadable. The man in the suit offered a thin smile. "Specialist Rodriguez, I'm Agent Keller, Office of Tactical Assessment." Which was a lie. She knew that department didn't exist, at least not under that name. Williams folded his hands. "You've been selected for a training evaluation." Her eyes flicked to him. "A what, sir?" "Marksmanship audit," the lieutenant said quickly, reading from a folder. "Command's doing a cross-unit proficiency review. You'll be attached to Range Delta for 2 weeks." Maya looked at the colonel again. He didn't meet her gaze. She felt it then, the quiet tightening of invisible threads. A test, a probe, and maybe a trap. "Understood, sir," she said, voice even. "Dismissed," Williams replied. But as she turned to leave, he added softly, "Rodriguez, whatever this is, stay sharp." She nodded once and walked out, heart steady but mind racing. That night she packed her gear. Minimal, efficient, a duffel, a sidearm, nothing else. The moonlight spilled across the floor, turning her shadow into something tall and unfamiliar. When she looked at it, she realized how long it had been since she'd felt its weight. She used to be comfortable in that shape. Now it felt like an accusation. Range Delta sat on the far edge of Fort Blackstone, a stretch of desert reserved for long-range ballistic testing. Few went there without clearance. It was quiet, isolated, perfect for secrets. The next morning, Maya reported in. The instructors were already waiting. Sergeant Pierce, looking uneasy now, and the same cocky Corporal Thompson who had mocked her days earlier. He avoided her eyes. "Specialist," Pierce greeted stiffly. "You'll be assisting with target calibration today. Command wants accuracy data logged for new recruits." "Yes, Sergeant." She walked past them to the firing line, checking the equipment. Every rifle had been stripped, reassembled, and numbered. But one, the M40A5, sat apart, pristine, freshly cleaned. Her chest tightened. Pierce followed her gaze. "They requested that one specifically," he said quietly. "Who did?" He hesitated. "Orders came down from higher, didn't say who." "Of course they didn't." She exhaled slowly, kneeling beside the rifle. Her hands moved instinctively, checking the bolt, the scope, the chamber. Everything was perfect, too perfect. Someone wanted her to use it. The first recruits arrived, young and restless. She coached them in silence, adjusting posture, explaining breath control. The kind of simple guidance that hides a lifetime of precision. Hours passed. The sun climbed, then began to fall. When the last recruit left, Pierce approached her again. "They're impressed," he said, "even the brass upstairs." She didn't answer. "You know," he added quietly, "whatever this is, they're watching. Every shot you take, someone's recording it." She looked up. "I know." Then she fired a single round downrange. The shot was perfect because she wanted it to be. Somewhere in an office miles away, Data lit up a screen. Keller would be smiling. Williams would be frowning. And the machine that had once erased her was beginning to remember. That night, Williams sat alone again, staring at the live feed footage from Range Delta. 3 monitors glowed in the dark, each showing the same image. Maya, silent, steady, centered behind the rifle. Keller stood behind him. "Impressive," he said. "Your supply clerk is outperforming Tier 1 snipers." "She's not a clerk," Williams replied. Keller smirked. "Not anymore. Command's interested in reactivation." "Reactivation?" Williams turned in his chair. "You can't just pull her back. She didn't leave, she was erased." Keller's eyes were cold. "Erased is easier to rewrite than dead. We need assets, Colonel, ones who can disappear again." Williams stared at him, realization dawning like something poisonous. "You want to use her." "We want to redeploy her. Different words, same result." Williams clenched his jaw. "She's done enough." "Apparently not," Keller said. "Orders are being drafted. If she passes the final assessment, she's going back under cover." "And if she refuses?" Keller's smile thinned. "Then we remind her what happens to ghosts who think they're alive." Maya didn't need to hear the conversation to feel its echo. She sensed it the way a veteran senses an ambush, through silence that's too still. The next morning she found a new file slipped under her door. No name, no seal, just a single sheet inside. Coordinates, a time, and one line handwritten in ink. "Balance begins where ghosts return." She sat on the bunk for a long time, staring at the words. "Balance," Alvarez's voice whispered from memory. "One for them, one for us." She folded the paper neatly, tucked it into her breast pocket, and stood. If they wanted the ghost back, they would get her, but not the way they expected. At dusk, the desert turned red, like the earth itself remembered blood. She stood again at Range Delta, the M40A5 resting beside her, the world humming with heat and distance. She closed her eyes, listening. The faint rumble of trucks, the wind brushing against the metal rails, the soft click of safety off. She wasn't afraid. She had spent years afraid of discovery, of silence, of herself. But fear had limits, purpose didn't. Behind her, footsteps crunched. Williams alone. "You got the note," he said. "Yes, sir." "I tried to stop them," he added. "I know." He stepped closer. They think they can control you again, use you, but they don't understand what you became out there. She looked at him, eyes steady. They understand enough, that's why they're afraid. Williams nodded slowly. If you go through with this test tomorrow, there's no going back. They'll have their proof. She picked up the rifle, slinging it over her shoulder. Maybe that's what I want. He frowned. To be used again. To choose, she said simply. Williams exhaled. Then God help them if they're wrong. That night Maya cleaned the rifle by lamplight, every motion ritualistic. She remembered Alvarez's laugh, the sound of snow cracking beneath boots, the silence after the 9th shot. Her hands didn't shake, not anymore. When she finished, she looked at her reflection in the rifle's barrel. The woman staring back wasn't a supply clerk. She wasn't a phantom either. She was something in between. Alive but half buried. And maybe that was enough. Outside, the wind rose again, dry, whispering, familiar. It carried a promise only she could hear. Tomorrow they would test her, measure her, record her. But what they didn't know was that desert wind never fired without a purpose. And this time, the target wasn't on the range. The desert was still when she woke. No sound, no motion. Only the slow rising of a pale red sun climbing over the ridge line. Maya dressed in silence. The uniform felt heavier today, not from weight, but from knowing what it meant. She tied her hair tight, smoothed the creases in her sleeves, and checked the small, folded paper still in her pocket, the one that had appeared under her door the night before. Balance begins where ghosts return. She read it again, though she already knew it by heart. Then she slipped it back into place, grabbed the rifle case, and stepped out into the morning light. The walk to Range Delta was long. The base had barely woken, only a few early joggers and the hum of trucks starting in the distance. The desert wind whispered across the open ground, carrying grit and memory. When she arrived, the range was already alive, too alive. Command tents lined the perimeter, cameras mounted on tripods, tablets in officers' hands, and standing beside the firing lanes, Colonel Williams and Agent Keller. Maya's eyes lingered on the man in the suit. The last time she'd seen someone wearing a tie out here, it had been during an investigation, one that ended with people vanishing from rosters and photographs. Keller smiled. "Good morning, Specialist Rodriguez. Appreciate you coming out early." His voice was smooth, too smooth. Maya nodded once, "Sir." Williams gave her a small nod of reassurance, though his eyes said something else. "Be careful." Keller gestured to the range. "We're running a live fire evaluation. Long-distance precision under environmental pressure. Shouldn't be anything new for someone of your particular talents." He said it with a kind of knowing that made her stomach tighten. "Understood," she said flatly. "Excellent," he turned to his team. "Begin setup." Technicians hurried to adjust the range. Targets appeared far beyond the usual limits over a mile away. She watched them through the scope and almost smiled. The angles, the wind, the heat shimmer. It was a setup built to make her fail. Or prove she wasn't who she claimed to be. She unpacked the M40A5 methodically. Bolt, scope, magazine, each movement slow, deliberate. Her pulse was steady. "Whenever you're ready," Keller said. She didn't answer. She simply breathed. The first shot cracked through the morning air, rolling like thunder across the flats. The round hit dead center. Keller's smile faltered. Williams' jaw tightened. Then came the second shot, and the third. Each perfect, each precise. The tech beside Keller whispered, "That's a subMOA group at 1,200 meters." Keller didn't respond. His gaze was fixed on Maya, calm, expressionless, as if the world had slowed around her. "Impressive," he said finally, "but we'd like to try something a little more realistic." He snapped his fingers. Two soldiers rolled forward a steel target rig, shaped like a moving silhouette, painted in enemy colors. She knew this wasn't protocol. Live simulation at that range with moving targets, it was evaluation theater. But she said nothing. The rig began to move. "Engage," Keller ordered. She adjusted the scope, reading the wind through the shimmer of heat waves. Her breathing slowed, heartbeat syncing with the movement. The rifle felt alive in her hands, like it had been waiting for this moment all along. She fired. The round hit just above the left shoulder of the moving target, a non-lethal disabling shot. Keller raised a brow. "Center mass specialist, you know the drill." She exhaled softly. The targets neutralized either way. Orders were for center. Maya looked at him through the scope. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. "With respect, sir, orders aren't always the same as judgment." A muscle twitched in Keller's jaw. "Fire again." She didn't. She lifted her head, eyes meeting his. "This isn't an evaluation, it's exposure." The air thickened. Even the soldiers nearby shifted uneasily. Keller gave a cold smile. "Maybe, but exposure reveals truth." He turned toward Williams. "Colonel, perhaps you'd prefer to brief her yourself. She respects you, doesn't she?" Williams stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Rodriguez," he began slowly, "this test isn't about your accuracy. It's about readiness. Command believes there's still a need for people like you." "People like me don't exist," she said. He sighed. "You and I both know that's not true." Keller cut in. "We have an overseas situation developing. High-value target, unstable region, plausible deniability. Your file makes you ideal. No rank, no record, no trail." Maya stood slowly, lowering the rifle. "You want the ghost back." "We want results," Keller corrected, "and the results are exceptional." She stepped closer, eyes sharp. "You buried me for 3 years. You made me a shadow. And now you want me to vanish again so someone else can sleep at night believing it's all classified and clean." Keller's tone cooled. "You don't get to decide what clean means, specialist." "Neither do you," she replied. Williams moved between them. "That's enough. She hasn't agreed to anything." Keller's eyes narrowed. "She doesn't have to. The orders are already in motion." Maya turned toward the rifle again, the desert heat bending the horizon into ghosts. She thought of Alvarez, of the mountains, of the promise she'd made when she vanished to never pull the trigger for someone else's convenience again. And yet here they were, asking her to become the weapon they once feared. Hours later, the range was empty. Keller had left with his team, satisfied enough to write his report. Williams lingered near the edge of the field, watching Maya disassemble the rifle piece by piece. "You handled yourself well," he said quietly. She didn't look up. "That wasn't handling, sir. That was restraint." He nodded slowly. "They'll come back, you know that." "I know." "What are you going to do?" She paused, then said, "What I should have done years ago." "Which is?" "Decide who I am before they decide for me." Williams studied her. "You think you can fight the machine that built you?" "No," she said, sliding the bolt out and wiping it clean. "But I can make sure it remembers what it created." That night, Keller made his call from a secure satellite line. "Asset confirmed," he said into the receiver. "Operational viability, uncompromised. Authorization requested for field reactivation under Tier 7 clause." The voice on the other end was distorted, older, colder. "Proceed. Full clearance granted. Keep her contained until deployment." Keller smirked. "And if she resists?" "Then make her believe she volunteered." Meanwhile, across base housing, Maya sat alone under the dim light of her room. Her hands rested on the dismantled rifle laid out on the table, every component aligned perfectly. She stared at the firing pin for a long time. Weapons didn't feel guilt, people did. But when people became weapons, the line blurred. She picked up the small folded paper again. "Balance begins where ghosts return." Maybe balance wasn't about justice. Maybe it was about truth. And the truth was, she was tired of hiding from herself. Just before midnight, Williams received a classified transmission. Priority: immediate deployment authorization, Rodriguez, Maya. Status: reactivation confirmed. Destination: undisclosed. He stared at the screen, anger simmering beneath control. They'd gone around him, and she had no idea what waited beyond that order. In her quarters, Maya finished reassembling the rifle. The final click echoed through the small room. She closed her eyes, whispering to the silence, "Alvarez, if I'm going back, it won't be as their weapon." Then she stood, shouldered the rifle, and looked out through the small window at the sleeping base, lights glowing faint and far. The wind picked up, rattling the blinds. To anyone else, it was just the desert breathing. To her, it sounded like a memory. A whisper from another lifetime. The same voice that once called her desert wind. Sometimes ghosts don't wait to be summoned. Sometimes they decide when the haunting begins. The transport jet cut through the night like a blade through silk. No markings, no insignia, just matte gray steel and silence. Maya sat alone near the rear bulkhead, helmet in her lap, eyes fixed on nothing. The engines hummed in the background, low and constant, the kind of sound that numbs thought. She preferred it that way. Keller had briefed her before takeoff, his voice clinical, detached. "Routine overwatch," he'd said. "Reconnaissance support for an Allied convoy in northern Khorasan. You won't engage unless authorized. Observe, confirm, extract." He'd smiled then, as if reading a script. But the way he'd avoided her eyes told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't reconnaissance. It was cleanup. And she was the broom. She looked out the narrow window beside her seat. Below, the world was black and endless, cut by faint rivers of light where distant towns clung to survival. Somewhere under those clouds, history was repeating itself. Men with guns, orders wrapped in patriotism, shadows wearing names that didn't belong to them. Her gloved fingers tightened on the rifle case at her feet. The M40A5 was secured inside, stripped, oiled, reassembled. The weapon she had once buried was now her only companion. Across from her, a young airman avoided looking at her. He'd probably been told she was a contractor, maybe even a consultant. The less anyone knew, the cleaner the reports. She didn't blame him. Some ghosts were better left unacknowledged. They landed at 03:17 local time. The air was cold, thin, heavy with dust. The runway lights glowed dim through the fog. A small convoy waited, 3 armored trucks, engines idling. No insignia there either. Keller was waiting by the lead vehicle. Suit replaced by tactical gear, still immaculate, like someone pretending to understand dirt. "Welcome to the frontier," he said. "Your perch is 6 clicks north. Overwatch position Delta 1. You'll have line of sight on the objective village. Transmission orders only. No engagement unless directed." Maya nodded once, understood. He handed her a sealed tablet. "Coordinates are preloaded. Comms encrypted. You report directly to me." Of course, no intermediaries, no witnesses. She climbed into the rear vehicle. The door slammed shut behind her. As they drove through the darkness, she watched the horizon shift from shadow to faint silver. The mountains loomed ahead, ancient, indifferent, scarred. Somewhere out there, the world was about to forget itself again. They reached Delta 1 just before dawn. The observation post sat atop a ridge overlooking a valley where a cluster of clay houses huddled like secrets. The team set up quickly, 2 spotters, 1 comms tech and her. "Primary objective," the tech explained, pointing to a satellite image, "is this compound here. Civilian housing on the surface, but intel says it's storing advanced weapon systems. Local militia." Maya studied the photo. The structure didn't look like a weapons cache. It looked like a home. How solid your intel? She asked. The tech shrugged. Come straight from stateside. Which meant Keller. She felt a cold pit form in her stomach. Hours passed. The sun climbed high. Heat waves shimmered off the rocks. Through her scope, she watched the valley breathe, men carrying water, children running between walls, a woman hanging laundry that rippled like surrender flags in the wind. No weapons, no militia. Just people. Command wants confirmation, the comms tech said, lowering his headset. They're asking for a mark. She hesitated. Mark what? Target Alpha, the house with the blue tarp. She looked again through the scope. A small courtyard, 2 goats, 3 kids playing with a rusted bicycle. Her throat tightened. There's nothing there, she said quietly. Orders say otherwise. Orders are wrong. The tech frowned, uncertain. I just relay, ma'am. Maya exhaled. Don't relay this one. He blinked. What? She adjusted the rifle, sliding the safety back on. Tell command the wind's too high for precision confirmation. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Copy that. The moment passed, but not for her. She lowered the rifle, staring out over the valley. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't a mistake, it was manipulation. Someone had fed them false coordinates. Someone wanted her to pull the trigger on civilians and vanish before anyone asked why. And she had almost done it. By dusk, she'd made her decision. When the comms line went silent for the 3rd time, she packed her gear. Where are you going? The tech asked. Down there, she said simply. That's not protocol. Neither is shooting children. She slung the rifle and started down the ridge before anyone could stop her. The valley smelled of smoke and rain. As she approached the compound, the sound of distant engines echoed not from her convoy, but from the east. Trucks, many of them. She crouched low behind a stone wall, scanning the horizon. Through the scope, she saw figures dismounting, uniforms she didn't recognize. Not local militia, not regular army. Private contractors. Her pulse slowed, controlled. Keller's men. She turned back toward the village, realization hitting like a shot. The operation wasn't recon, it was erasure. She wasn't here to protect a convoy. She was here to confirm a strike, one that would wipe this valley clean and bury the evidence of whatever Keller was hiding. Her earpiece crackled, Keller's voice calm as always. Specialist Rodriguez, confirm visual on target Alpha. She didn't answer. Rodriguez, do you copy? She switched off the comms. The silence that followed was the most honest sound she'd heard in years. From the ridge above, distant lights flared, the glint of lenses, the silhouettes of snipers setting up in formation. She counted 6. Her training did the math automatically. Wind, angle, timing. They were positioning for a full sweep. Not a mission, a massacre. And she was standing between it and its excuse. Maya dropped prone, aligning her scope on the lead spotter's ridge. The first man leaned over his rifle, waiting for orders. She whispered to herself, "You want the ghost back, here she is." Her shot cracked through the valley, a whisper of thunder. The spotter's scope shattered, the man thrown backward. Chaos rippled across the ridgeline. Shouts, movement, confusion. She shifted position, fast, methodical. Another target appeared in her crosshairs, a second sniper adjusting his aim. Exhale, fire. Dust erupted where he'd stood. The rest went aground. She moved downhill, low and fast, blending into shadow. Her rifle felt weightless now, an extension of will. For the first time in years, the ghost was awake. By the time she reached the compound, the villagers were already panicking. Mothers ushering children indoors, men looking to the sky. "Go inside," she shouted in broken Dari. "Get down, stay low." They didn't understand her words, but they understood fear. A low rumble rolled from the west engines, heavier this time. She looked up. Drones. Tiny dark shapes against the red horizon. She cursed under her breath. Keller had moved to the next phase. She dropped the rifle, grabbed the radio from her belt, and switched to a scrambled frequency. "Colonel Williams," she whispered, "if you can hear this, they're not who they say they are. There's no militia here. They're contractors. They're going to bomb civilians. Repeat, civilians." Static answered. Then a faint voice. "Rodriguez, where are you?" "Too close." She looked back up the ridge. Flames flickered now. One of the sniper positions had detonated, probably from secondary ammo. "Williams, they're calling it an off-grid strike," she said quickly. "If they ask you to sign off, don't." "Copy that," his voice replied, strained. "I'll try to shut it down from here." "Try faster." The first missile struck the far edge of the valley, a distant thunderclap of dust and light. Maya threw herself over the nearest child, shielding him with her body as the shockwave rippled through the street. The second strike hit closer. Her ears rang, the world blurred. And through the ringing, she heard it again, Alvarez's voice faint from somewhere deep in memory. "Balance, Maya, one for them, one for us." She rose slowly, smoke curling around her. Somewhere behind the haze, Keller's voice barked through comms she'd already broken. "Confirm impact, confirm kill." She looked toward the sky, eyes narrowing. "Not yet," she whispered. Then she ran. Back at Fort Blackstone, alarms lit up the operations hub. Williams burst into the control room, shoving past analysts. "What the hell did you authorize?" he barked. Keller wasn't there, only a young officer pale with panic. "Sir, it's not us. HQ greenlit it directly. Remote Ops Command took over satellite control." "Under whose authority?" The officer swallowed. "Yours, sir." Williams froze. His signature was flashing on the screen, an authorization code he hadn't entered. Keller had forged it. He gritted his teeth. God damn it. He slammed the intercom. "Lock out remote targeting now." "Too late, sir. Ordnance already deployed." Williams stared at the satellite feed, the valley engulfed in fire. "Maya," he whispered. Down below, the explosions rolled like thunder across the mountains. The ground trembled beneath her feet. But she wasn't running anymore. She was aiming. Through smoke and fire, she lined up the final shot, not at Keller's men, not at the drones. At the transmitter beacon guiding the strike. She inhaled once, exhaled slowly, and fired. The bullet cut through the chaos, striking the beacon dead center. The signal blinked, sputtered, died. The last drone turned mid-flight, then spiraled out of control, crashing into the cliffs beyond the village. Silence followed. Real silence. For the first time in years, the world stopped moving. She lowered the rifle. Her ears still rang, her lungs burned, but she was alive. So were most of the villagers. She looked toward the ridge, smoke rising, debris glowing faint orange. Somewhere up there, Keller was realizing his ghost hadn't followed orders. And for once, she didn't care what came next. She picked up her radio, voice steady, raw. "Colonel, I'm still here." Williams' reply came through static, choked with relief. "Then we're not done yet." The valley was still burning when the sun came up. Ash drifted like snow through the air, coating everything in a gray film that made the world look half-erased. The smell of cordite and soil hung heavy. Somewhere a child was crying, soft, high, endless. Maya sat in the dust beside the shattered transmitter, the M40A5 across her knees. Her hands were black with soot. Every breath hurt. She had stopped the last missile, but not the lie that came with it. Over the ridge, the surviving villagers were moving carefully, stunned and silent, gathering what little remained. She didn't try to speak to them. What could she say? A truck's engine roared in the distance. Not Keller's convoy, This one was faster, lighter. She knew before it arrived that it wasn't rescue. The radio on her belt crackled. "Specialist Rodriguez, this is Command Blackstone. You are ordered to stand down and await recovery. You are considered compromised." Compromised? She almost laughed. "Copy that," she said, voice flat. Then she shut the radio off and walked toward the mountains. Back at Fort Blackstone, William stood in the operations room, staring at the data feed Keller had hijacked. The monitors showed only static now. The satellite link had gone dark minutes after the last detonation. "What the hell happened?" he demanded. No one answered. Keller strode in, immaculate again, though the dust on his boots betrayed haste. "Containment complete," he said. "The strike neutralized an unauthorized asset. Collateral minimal." Williams turned on him. "Unauthorized? You mean the woman who saved 42 Americans in the Kush and just prevented you from bombing a village full of civilians?" Keller's smile didn't move his eyes. "She went rogue, Colonel. We have footage she engaged friendly units, destroyed classified equipment, disobeyed direct command. That's treason, not heroism. You forged my clearance to authorize that strike." "Prove it." Williams took a step forward. "If she's alive, I'll find her first." Keller shrugged. "Good luck. Recovery team's already in the air." Maya reached the upper ridge before noon. Her body ached, her throat raw from smoke. From up here, the valley looked peaceful again, like tragedy had been folded neatly and filed away. She crouched beside a small stream, rinsing blood and dust from her face. The water turned pink, then clear again. Her reflection looked older now. She heard a helicopter in the distance, low altitude, moving fast. They were coming. She took a slow breath and started moving toward the rocks, the rifle slung tight. Each step was deliberate, careful. She wasn't running, she was surviving. There's a difference. By the time the helicopter appeared over the ridge, she had already vanished into the maze of stone and shadow. Williams was moving too. He'd pulled an old clearance key from his desk, a relic from before the war in Khorasan, when he'd commanded Black Ops logistics. The kind of key that still opened doors most people didn't know existed. He slid it into the secure terminal. The screen flared to life, demanding credentials. He entered them manually, old habits. Then he began digging. Buried beneath the mission logs was a folder labeled S-53 Reintegration. Inside, correspondence between Keller and a group of private sector executives, contract authorizations, payment routing. They hadn't wanted Maya for a mission. They wanted her for demonstration, a live test of autonomous strike authorization. The ghost sniper had been bait, proof that human conscience could still outperform the algorithm they were selling. She'd been turned into marketing. Williams closed the file slowly, his stomach turned. He called Command HQ. "This is Colonel Daniel Williams, Fort Blackstone. I need immediate contact with Joint Operations." The voice that answered was unfamiliar. "Colonel, your access has been suspended pending inquiry into falsified deployment codes." He froze, they flipped it. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of duty. MPs will escort you." He hung up. He didn't have time to fight paperwork. He grabbed his sidearm, a field map, and the coordinates from Maya's last transmission. If Keller wanted her erased, he'd have to go through him. The sun was sinking when Maya found shelter in an abandoned outpost carved into the rock. The walls were pitted with old bullet holes, the roof half collapsed. She set the rifle down and sank against the wall, exhaustion creeping into her bones. For a long time she just sat there, listening to the wind push through the cracks. It sounded like breathing. She took out the folded paper again. "Balance begins where ghosts return." She whispered, "Balance doesn't begin anywhere. It's never there at all." Her eyelids grew heavy. She hadn't slept in 30 hours. The weight of silence pressed her down until she drifted into shallow dreams. Snow, radio static, Alvarez's laughter fading in the wind. When she woke, night had fallen, and someone was standing at the doorway. "Colonel." Williams lowered his pistol. Relief and anger crossed his face at once. "You're alive." "Barely." He stepped inside, crouched beside her. "They've made you the target. Every channel says you initiated the strike, killed civilians, compromised command." She gave a hollow laugh. "Efficient." "I can prove it's false," he said, voice urgent. "But Keller locked the data behind off-site servers. We need to get to the uplink in Al-Rasif before he scrubs the records." She looked at him tired. "And what then? You think truth changes anything?" He held her gaze. "It changes who walks away with a name." For a moment neither spoke, then she nodded once. "Then we move before sunrise." Keller's team arrived at the valley an hour later. They found the transmitter destroyed, 2 drones reduced to twisted metal, and no body. "Negative recovery," the team leader radioed. "Asset Delta not located." Keller's expression didn't change, but his tone turned sharp. "Expand perimeter. I want confirmation. Either I get her back or I get proof she doesn't exist." He cut the line and stared at the horizon. "Desert wind," he muttered. "Let's see how long you can run." Before dawn, Maya and Williams started their climb down from the ridge. They moved quietly, avoiding open ground. Williams carried the radio gear in a canvas pack. Maya kept the rifle wrapped in canvas to hide the gleam. They didn't talk much. Words took energy, and trust came slowly in war. But when they stopped to rest, Williams finally asked, "Why did you pick up that rifle again?" She thought for a long moment. "Because hiding didn't make me innocent, it just made me absent." He nodded. "And now?" She looked toward the east, where the first light was touching the horizon. "Now I settle the balance." By mid-morning, they reached the outskirts of Al-Rasif, a dead communications hub left behind after the last withdrawal. Satellite dishes leaned like skeletons against the sky. Williams checked his map. "The uplink's in the control tower. If Keller's deleting files, this is the last physical backup." Maya glanced at the empty road. "He'll know we're coming." "Then we don't give him time to prepare." They moved fast, cutting through the ruins. Every echo felt like a footstep that wasn't theirs. Inside the tower, the power grid still hummed faintly, enough to keep the terminal lights flickering. Williams hooked up the radio transceiver, typing commands. "If I can route this through the old relay, we can send the files to the pressnet before Keller intercepts." Maya watched the doorway, rifle steady. Minutes crawled by. Then the screen flashed. "Remote access DETACTED." Williams' breath caught. "He's in." A voice filled the small room, Keller's, distorted through the speaker. "Colonel Williams, Specialist Rodriguez, how considerate of you to save me the trouble of finding you." Maya's finger tightened on the trigger. "You think exposing classified files redeems you," Keller continued. "It only buries you deeper." Williams leaned over the mic. "You forged my authorization. You ordered a civilian strike. The system's recording this, Keller." Keller chuckled softly. "The system is mine, Colonel, and the next time someone pulls those records, they'll read that you died trying to stop her." Then the line went dead. Outside, engines echoed, vehicles approaching fast. Williams grabbed the hard drive from the terminal, yanking the cables free. "We've got the data. That's all that matters." "Then we run," Maya said. They slipped out a side door as the first convoy crested the hill. Bullets chewed through the air behind them. Masonry shattered. Maya fired twice without slowing, controlled bursts that bought seconds, nothing more. Williams stumbled, catching himself on a broken wall. "They'll cut us off at the bridge." "Not if we take the river. It's dry. Not deep enough to stop bullets." They dropped into the shallow ravine, sliding on gravel, sprinting toward the canyon mouth. Keller's men fanned out above them, searchlights slicing through the dust. The sound of a helicopter rose again. Williams shouted over the roar, "We can't outrun that." Maya turned, aiming at the searchlight. "We don't have to." One shot. The beam shattered, plunging the canyon into darkness. "Keep moving," she yelled. They ran until the engines faded behind them, and only the wind remained. When they finally stopped, both were shaking from exhaustion. Williams dropped to his knees, gasping. "You know, they're going to call us traitors." Maya sat beside him, wiping the dust from her face. "They already have." He looked at her. "What happens if we don't make it out?" She considered that, then said quietly, "Then maybe the story still does." He managed a weak smile. "You always talk like it's someone else's story." She looked toward the horizon where smoke still curled against the sky. "Because it is." High above, the dawn light crept across the desert, turning the rocks gold for a moment before the heat returned. Somewhere behind them, Keller was still hunting, still rewriting truth into reports that would outlive them both. But for now, in that fragile silence, Maya Rodriguez had something she hadn't felt since the day she disappeared. Not peace, not safety. Joyce. Because ghosts don't stay gone forever. Sometimes they walk beside the living, just long enough to remind them what silence costs. They reached the coast at night. The desert gave way to wind-scoured cliffs where the sea hammered itself against stone. It smelled of salt and iron, cleaner than blood, heavier than memory. Williams killed the jeep's lights and rolled to a stop beside the ruins of an old lighthouse. The engine ticked as it cooled. Above them, a single star burned through the fog like a watchful eye. "This is it," he said. "The last relay that still ties into a civilian network. If we push the data through here, Keller can't pull it back." Maya looked out toward the black water. Waves flashed white against the rocks, vanishing again into nothing. "And if they trace it?" He gave a small, tired smile. "Then at least they'll know why." Inside, the lighthouse was half collapsed. Rusted stairwell, broken lantern glass, gull feathers everywhere. They set up the transmitter on a stone table near the base. The hard drive clicked softly as it spun up. Williams tapped commands into the terminal. "Signal's weak but stable. Once it starts uploading, we can't stop it." Maya crouched near the window, scanning the horizon through the scope. Her movements were automatic, slow, methodical, quiet. Every creak of metal made her shoulders tense. She said, almost to herself, "You ever wonder how many people believe what they're told because the truth's too heavy to lift?" Williams didn't look up. "Every day." She glanced back at him. "Then why keep lifting it?" "Because somebody has to." The transmitter began to hum, data crawling across the screen. Encrypted reports, Keller's forged orders, the proof that the strike in Khorasan wasn't a mistake but a demonstration. Williams watched the progress bar inch forward. "We're past 40%. Once it hits the relay, the whole world gets a copy." Maya nodded, but her eyes were already outside. Something in the dark was moving, small pinpricks of light bouncing across the cliffs. Headlights. "They're here." "How far?" "Half a click, maybe less." He swore under his breath. "We need 5 more minutes." She slung the rifle and stood. "Then you get your 5. The first bullet hit the lighthouse wall, spraying dust and stone. Another cracked the window. Maya dropped to a knee, sighted through the broken pane, and fired once. One of the lights on the cliffs went dark. Williams flinched. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Her voice was calm, steady, not angry but certain. She moved like a memory returning to form, breath sinking with each pull of the trigger. Outside, Keller's men spread out, trading light for cover. They weren't reckless. They were professionals, the kind who believed orders made them righteous. Maya picked them off in silence. No shouts, no triumph, just precision. Then through the scope she saw him. Keller, standing beside a truck, headset pressed to his ear, shouting into the wind. Even from this distance, she could see the certainty in his posture. The man who believed control was the same thing as truth. She exhaled, finger tightening on the trigger, and stopped. Killing him would end a man, not a system. She lowered the rifle. Inside, Williams called out, "Upload complete. We're live." On the monitor, streams of data flowed out into the world, through proxy nodes, through news feeds, through every quiet server that had ever waited for something honest. Keller must have seen the spike. His voice burst through the radio frequency, distorted but furious. "Rodriguez, shut it down. You think anyone will believe you. You're a ghost, a rumor." She lifted the radio, pressed the button, and said softly, "Then let them decide what a ghost can do." She dropped it on the floor. A moment later, the outside world erupted in light. Flare grenades burst over the cliffs, bathing the sea in harsh white. She grabbed Williams by the arm. "Go." He hesitated. "Not without you." "Colonel, if they take both of us, there's no one left to tell it straight. Get to the jeep. Get out." He saw something in her eyes then, the same calm he'd seen the day she fired those impossible shots. The calm of someone already made peace with consequence. He nodded once. "Don't take too long." She almost smiled. "I never do." Outside, the wind howled. She ran along the outer ledge, using the flashes to mask her movement. The sea sprayed cold against her face. She found a position, overlooking the narrow path leading to the lighthouse, and went prone. The first of Keller's men rounded the bend. She fired warning shots, deliberate misses that forced them to cover. She wasn't hunting them. She was buying time. For every minute she held, the truth spread further. Headlines were already forming somewhere in a newsroom she'd never see. "Whistleblower exposes rogue strike program." "Military denies existence of desert wind." She pictured the noise of it, the confusion, the questions, the slow erosion of the lie. It would be enough. Williams reached the jeep, engine sputtering to life. In the rearview mirror, he saw the lighthouse flash once, then again, gunfire or signal, he couldn't tell. He whispered, "Hold on, kid." The radio hissed. A single transmission came through, her voice quiet, half drowned in static. Balance held. Then nothing. At dawn, Keller's task force swept the ruins. They found spent shells, footprints in the sand, a shattered rifle scope, and blood, but no body. The sea had claimed the rest. When Keller reported to headquarters later that day, he was already rehearsing the narrative. Hostile engagement, unstable asset, tragic loss. The kind of ending that keeps files closed. But before he could finish, an aide burst into the briefing room holding a tablet. "Sir, it's everywhere. News outlets, military boards, independent feeds. The files, everything's public." Keller's face went pale. "That's impossible." "Then the impossible happened, sir." He turned slowly toward the window. The morning light glared too bright to look at. Outside, the wind was rising. Weeks later, in a small coastal town half a world away, an old fisherman found a weathered duffel washed up on shore. Inside, a rusted dog tag, a broken radio, and a single note sealed in plastic. He couldn't read English, but he kept the tag. The note he handed to a passing traveler who posted a photo of it online. It read, "Some missions never happened. Some people were never there. But the truth, it always finds its mark." The handwriting was steady, deliberate, unmistakably hers. Back at Fort Blackstone, the base had changed. The shooting range was quiet now, empty except for the echo of old legends. A new plaque had appeared on the wall, unofficial and unsigned. Excellence doesn't ask for permission. It simply reveals itself when the moment demands. No one claimed to know who put it there. Williams returned to the range one evening, long after his resignation. He stood in the same spot where it had all begun, the sun sinking behind the targets, the air still humming with invisible heat. He closed his eyes and could almost hear her again. The click of the bolt, the slow breath, the silence after perfection. He smiled faintly. Rest easy, desert wind. The breeze stirred across the sand, carrying the faint scent of gun oil and dust. And for a heartbeat, he swore he heard a distant voice, steady, calm, certain. Some ghosts never die, Colonel. They just fade into the wind. The camera would hold on the empty range a moment longer. The sound of wind builds, then fades. A long pause. Then the narrator's last line, soft and certain. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.